Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. So today's video I thought we'd take another look at the Creative Stampin' magazine. This is issue 84 and this was the best of British stamp set, and it came with this Union flag stencil as well. So I only created one video and I've only actually created the 3 cards that I made in that video with this particular stamp set. So I thought maybe we'd just crack it out again and just create a couple more cards with it. So for this first card, I'm just going to be using this old-fashioned telephone stamp. And what I'm going to do is get out my stamping platform, and I'm going to be creating sort of a grid, like a background all over kind of pattern with this stamp. It's super easy to do, especially if you do have a stamping platform. Obviously you can see here I've taken a T-square ruler and I'm really just marking up where I'm going to put my center one, which isn't something that I really do very often. But since I got this new T-square ruler, I mean, it sounds really silly, but I actually really enjoy using it. So what I'm doing is just using the ruler just to sort of work out where I want to place my center stamp, and then I can go ahead and start stamping around it in a grid pattern, like I said, to create a really fun sort of all over background. The outline ink that I'll be using for this telephone stamp is going to be new to me, the Memento Tuxedo Black ink pad, because I do want to colour these images in after I've stamped them using my Tri-Blend markers. So then I need an alcohol proof ink pad, and this one is perfect. Okay, so I've got my centre stamp down, so what I can do is just work around this now, and I'm just gonna constantly move it and just try to line it up as best I can so I can get that sort of, like I said, all over grid pattern. So I'm just trying to line up the bottom of the stamp, and obviously with the sides of the stamp as well. And I am just wiping off the sort of leftover ink from my stamp, just because when I move it and I'm positioning it, I don't want to have any sort of marks of ink that goes down in case I do want to move it. So I am just sort of wiping off, like I said, that last little residue of ink. I do think this is such a good and easy way of creating a card or creating a background just using that one stamp. So perhaps if you've got one stamp that you do really love, you can really easily create a background with it. So you could either do it like this, which is in rows and columns, or you could just do sort of a general all over background, have them sort of angled, upside down, and create something really quite interesting. So there we go, we're just going to stamp this very last telephone stamp, and I really love how this is looking. So I could just leave this black and white, because what's really great is this stamp has a lot of detail in it, so a lot of sort of shadows and highlight sections in it already. So when I come to colouring this in with my alcohol markers, I really don't have to do too much to kind of add that colour in. As I said, I'm going to use my Tri-Blend markers by Spectrum Noir to colour this in. So I decided to go with a rainbow pattern. So I picked out just a bunch of colours that would sort of follow in that rainbow pattern. So I picked out my green citrus blend, my yellow citrus blend. I went for the dark red. I went for the orange blend. I went for I think it was the true blue, the purple blend, and then I decided to pick the jade as well because I wanted that extra sort of colour in there. And like I said, I'm going to do a rainbow pattern, so I'm just going to sort of go through these colours and then just repeat them. So what I'm going to do is just start with the citrus green blend, and I'm going to start up here in this first image. Like I said, because this stamp has got so much detail on it, I really don't need to worry kind of too much about getting the shading and everything in there. So I'm just going to lay down a layer of the light colour first, and then I'm really simply just going to go in sort of a random sort of pattern, trying to follow the detail that's on the stamp with the dark and the medium, just to get a little bit more sort of contrast in there. And I really love the way that these came out, again, because there is that much detail in the stamp. It just makes for really, really easy colouring. So what I'm going to do is just carry on colouring the rest of these stamps in the exact same way. Like I said, just using the detail that's already in the stamp for the shadow sections. And you can see here, I think it looks really good. I think this would be perfect for a masculine card. I just think, especially depending on the colours that you pick to colour this in, I just think the stamp works really well. And I really love how much of black detail is in this particular stamp. And this is a really quick and easy way, like I said, to create a background card. I don't need to add sort of too much to this to finish it off. Really, all we're going to do is add a sentiment. So there is the background all finished and coloured in. And yeah, I just really love the way that this has come out. What you could do just to emphasise these telephones a little bit more is you could colour a couple in, fussy cut them and pop them onto some foam pads. So you could easily add some dimension to this as well. So what we're going to do now is, just to finish this off, is to add a sentiment. So I'm just going to take the stamp that says "Call Me." I think that's perfect for this particular card because we do have those telephones on there. And I didn't want to just have a really tiny "Call Me" sort of in the middle, so I'm going to create a long strip that's going to go all the way across the front of the card with then just simply this "Call Me" sentiment on it. So I've just got a scrap piece of cardstock, just one that I've cut off when I've obviously cut my cards down. And all I'm going to do is just stamp this again in that black Memento ink pad. And I'm just going to stamp this sort of roughly in the middle. So because the stamp is sort of on the smaller side, I do want to have it sat in the middle, but you could obviously sort of arrange this however you want. So once I've stamped that, I'm just going to pop it into my paper trimmer, and I'm going to cut this down to be sort of just as thick as the wording is itself. So I'm going to chop just a little bit off the top and off the bottom. So if ever you see me sort of cut anything like sentiments, what I tend to do is match up the very bottom of my sentiment. So I use the words as a guide, and I usually sort of match that up against the inner line of the piece of clear plastic that comes down. That way then I know what I'm cutting is going to be straight, but also it gives me enough of a border at the top and the bottom. So I sort of pick that as my sort of guide when I am creating strips or I'm cutting out sentiments, and I just pretty much stick with that. So now we've got our strip. I'm actually going to pop it through one of the rows of colours because I just think I think it balances a little bit better. And I'm just going to leave it sort of plain white. But what I am going to do is take that black Memento ink pad again, and I'm actually just going to run the edges of this sentiment strip through it. So you're not going to be able to see sort of too much, but it will kind of just add that little bit of detail onto the sentiment strip, and it's going to grind it a little bit more. So it could look like it's got a really, really tiny matte and layer. So you could do this more than what you will see on here. You could put some glue on it, dip it in some glitter. You could again glue it. You could put it in some embossing powder. You could put it in coloured. I could have taken one of my alcohol markers to do this, but I like how it's come out with the black. But just so I don't ruin my card, I'm just now going to wipe it over this microfiber cloth just to kind of get rid of any sort of wet ink that's sat on the surface that hasn't quite absorbed in yet. And then I'm just going to use a tape roll, and I'm just going to adhere our strip like I said. So we're going through that second row of telephones, and it's just going to finish this card off perfectly. So I'm just going to put that "Call Me" sentiment just directly into the middle of my card, so in the middle of this purple telephone. And all we need to do then is just cut off the excess cardstock around the edges. I really like how this card has come out, really clean and simple. Again, not using sort of too much, but making use of a particular stamp that is in your stamp set, creating a background with it. I just think is such a great way of using your stamps. So you can see here the card, so you can see just dipping that sentiment into the black along the edge just gives it that extra little bit of detail, so it sort of helps it to stand out. But yeah, I really love the way that this card has come out, and like I said, I think it's perfect if you want to create a masculine card. Yeah, perfect. So let's have a look at the second card that I'm going to create. So both of these cards that I've made are 7 by 5. So again here I've just taken a blank piece of cardstock, and what I'm going to actually do is just divide this cardstock up. I'm not really doing any measuring, but I'm going to divide it up into 5 different sections. So my idea for this particular card is I wanted to try and use as many of the stamps in this stamp set as possible. So there are quite a few in here which I haven't actually used. The one that I really love is the dog on the cushion. I do love that one. But I want to try and get as many stamps on this card as possible. So I thought one of the really great ways of being able to do that was just to kind of create almost like a collage of images. So this is going to be sort of another version of my Best of British card. And like I said, I'm going to try and get all of those stamps in here. So you can see I've just marked off my sections, and the reason I've done that is just so I can get my masking tape sort of lined up properly. So you can see here I'm just going to the top section, and I'm just using some of this purple tape just to mask off that area, just in case I get any ink obviously outside of this section. I don't want it to go onto the rest of my card. The ink pads that I'm going to be using are my Prism World of Colour ink pads. I'm going to be using some of the new colours that I've added to my collection. So the first stamp that I'm going to take is this telephone box. So obviously this stamp set is the Best of British. So I want this card to kind of be that, you know, real Best of British images. That's why I want to get as many in as possible. So the colour here that I've used is this periwinkle. So what I'm going to do is for all of the sections, I'm going to stamp all of the images in the same colour. So I'm just going to put this one down first, and you can see I just inked up the very top of it because I knew it was going to be too long for the rest. And all I'm going to do then is just fill in this section using this periwinkle colour, and I'm just going to fill it in with lots of different stamps. So the next one I'm taking, so again, another one that I've not used is this teapot and teacup. And I'm just going to kind of angle this in. So I'm not going for anything too perfect. Some of the stamps are going to overlap, but because it's in that same colour, I'm not too worried about it. You could do this if you really wanted to fill it in. You could do some masking here so that you can get some in the background, some in the foreground. But I'm really happy just to have this be quite a flat image and just to kind of overlap some of them. So the next stamp I'm going for, of course, is our British flag, because you can't have Best of British without our flag. And so I'm just going to repeat this process of just picking different stamps that fit within the spaces and stamping it in this periwinkle colour. So then we've got a double-decker bus. So again, I know I'm not going to get much of this bus in, so I'm just going to have it coming off here, off the side. So again, this card is going to be a really great way of using all of the stamps that you have in a stamp set, and just to create something just a little bit different. Next up, we have got the taxi. So again, I'm having them all come off the edge. I'm having them at different angles. So I am really trying to keep it as interesting as possible. I'm also using the coloured ink because I don't want to be colouring these images in, but I really want them all to kind of blend together. So then you see me stamp the crown. So again, one of the crown is one of the stamps I haven't used. And then we've got one of these hats as well. So now that I've finished that section, all I'm going to do is just reposition my purple tape. And then I'm just going to go into the next section. But I am protecting the rest of my card. So the next section I'm going to be colouring with this fire coral colour. So this is kind of a red. So I was obviously going for that British colour theme. But because I end up with 4 or 5 sections, then I just picked a couple more colours. So then we've got the image of this woman. So obviously the Best of British, this includes some like wartime stamps as well. So you can see there I have stamped just a section of the aeroplane. And of course then we've got that telephone again. And I'm going to finish up just with the bottom half of that taxi. So again, it's just sort of filling in those gaps. Again, I'm just repositioning my tape and just matching those up with the marks that I've already made. So the next colour I'm going to use is this ocean spray colour. And I'm going to start with this, I think it's more like a lamppost kind of image. Then I'm going to move on to this bowler hat, which I think is a really fabulous stamp. So this one is going to have a little bit more white area just because of the images that I chose. So I'm just going to restamp that teapot and teacup and then finish this section off with the crown again. So you can see in between my layers I have left sort of different thicknesses of white strips. So I wanted to do this just to really kind of differentiate between the sort of sections. And what I'm going to do after is just take a fine liner and I'm just going to sort of highlight these sections. So the next colour we've got is Apricot Sorbet. So you can see I've gone in with the taxi, the telephone again, and my sections I've also made different widths. So you can see this one is quite small, so I don't fit much in the way of stamps in here. So you can see for that section we've got another flag in there. We've got then just a couple of hats as well. So the last colour I've picked is this wild mushroom colour, and of course now I'm going to go in with the dog. So I was really excited to use this dog, and I thought this mushroom colour would be perfect. Then I'm going to stamp the bottom half of the telephone box. Then we've got a little section of the bus, and then we're going to go back in with our lady. And then lastly, we're going to get that crown in there. I do really love this crown sentiment. But again, it's just sort of finding images that sort of go together nicely and just sort of fill in those gaps. So there you can see our sort of finished background. And I really love the way this has come out. Again, this isn't something that I've done before, but it's nice to kind of try and use all of the stamps from a stamp set. And I think something like this really does sort of give that best of British vibe. So all I'm going to do now is take my T-square ruler and I'm going to take this fine liner and I'm just going to sort of line off the sections here. I'm going to do a couple of just thin single lines and then I'm going to do a couple of thicker lines just to kind of give it a little bit more interest, and again just to sort of really finalize those sort of different kinds of sections. I think by adding these lines in, it's just going to finish off this background really nicely. So you can see here I've finished. Like I said, I've done some thicker lines, I've done some thinner lines, but I think that kind of works really well with the different sized sections as well. So again, really nothing was measured out here. It was all just kind of as random as possible, but I really, really do love the way this is finished up. And now to finish this card off, I'm just going to add some sentiments. So I'm going to go with Proud to be British. So my first thought was I was going to fit this in between the sort of blank white strips that we've got. But then in the end, I decided to sort of put it within the sections. So again, you could do something like add in a sentiment strip like we did on the first card. But this card here is pretty much going to be just one of those flat kind of cards. There's not sort of too much dimension. Obviously you can add more dimension if you want to, but I'm quite happy just sort of stamping directly onto the background. So the Proud to Be stamp is going to go within this second section here, and I'm just going to kind of just try and get it in the middle as best as possible. So you can see that just over the top, and because of that tuxedo black ink pad, obviously that shows up really, really well. Then we're going to go with the British stamp set, and that's going to go in the middle of this green section. So again, just stamping that as best I can in the middle. And it's going to finish this card off perfectly. So I really love the way this card has finished up. It's not something that is my sort of typical style of cards that I usually make. But what I think is brilliant with the stamp sets that come with these magazines, again, this is the Creative Stamping magazine, I think it just creates, I think it helps you to create different kinds of cards that perhaps aren't your style. Because, you know, for me, I want to think about all the different cards that I can make. So let's take another look at our finished cards, and I do really love them. I like the fact that we got the one on the left is using as many stamps as possible, but then the one on the right we are just using one stamp. So it doesn't matter whether you want to use lots or just one, you can create some really fabulous cards. So I hope this video has given you a little bit more inspiration on using this Best of British stamp set. If you did like this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment down below. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please do so you don't miss out on any future videos being posted, and it does really help support my channel. So thanks very much for stopping by, and happy crafting!